All right, it is surprisingly still day 3, Saturday of the New York Comic Con. It's 4 o'clock ish, and I'm here sitting in the River Pavilion with Joseph Illidge, and we're going to talk about his career and also his involvement with the comic book shop Kickstarter.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to chat with us, and how that. So before we talk about other things, tell us a little bit about yourself as a comic book reader and a creator. Do you remember the first comic book you read? What inspired you? What made you want to come do?
Wow, the big questions. Okay, so I've been in comics as a writer and editor, mostly an editor for 32 years now. I started at Milestone Media, first Black-owned comic book publisher to have a publishing deal with a major industry giant, which was DC Comics. From there, went on to become a groundbreaking editor in Batman. I worked for the run of Batman No Man's Land and the Batman Year 2000 relaunch, which brought writers like Greg Rucka and Devin Grayson and artists like Sean Martinborough and Dale Eaglesham into the Batman clan. Since then, I've worked for Heavy Metal, I've worked for Valiant, and now I have my own company, Illuminous, which is an editorial services company in which I bring my decades of experience to bear for clients, customers, and creators who want to introduce their original ideas as comics and graphic novels. As a writer, I am now writing for DC Comics, Todd McFarlane Productions and Image Comics, HarperCollins, and 23rd Street Books, which is the adult imprint from Macmillan.
Yeah.
In terms of what the first comic book I read was, we're going deep. I will say I was a DC kid. It may have been an issue of All-Star Comics, which starred the Justice Society. And it might have been an issue where the Golden Age Flash was fighting Vandal Savage on the cover. And I think that was second grade. And Power Girl was introduced later on that time. So it was the time, I think, of the DC explosion. And I really gravitated to teen books. Justice Society, Justice League, Legion of Superheroes, Superboy and a Legion of Superheroes was a big one for me. But then in the 4th grade, my aunt bought me a bunch of comics, and I discovered Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin, Glynis Wein, Tom Orzechowski, issue 112. I became an X-Men head, and I became a Marvel fan. And I would go back and forth throughout the decades. And so I've been with comics ever since the 2nd grade. But it was Milestone, the company that I first started as an intern. That was a company that really inspired me for my career path as an editor and then later as a writer.
So, having worn both the editor and writer hats, does one help you do the other? Is being an editor help you be a better writer? Does being a writer help you be a better editor?
That's an interesting question. I will say that definitely being an editor makes me a more collaborative writer, right? Because since I've spent so many years on the other side of the process, when I have an editor, I try to be the best writer, the best collaborator that I can be, and listen to their notes and take them to heart and really use that opportunity to make my scripts better. Going in the reverse direction, being a writer, making me a better editor, I think in part, what it really comes down to is, to me, the idea of theme at the core of story. When I look at, some writing these days, some writers have a clear understanding and brilliant execution of theme. Some writing seems a bit more scattered. So for me, as a writer, I always want to know what the foundation of the story is. I always want to know what the theme is. I always want to know what the character journey is. And so that helps me go back and forth with the writing and the editing to be able to always have cognizance of that foundation. Yeah.
So, as I mentioned before, you are involved with Lifeline Comics' comic book shop anthology series.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your involvement with that and how it came to be and what you're doing for them.
So what happened was Lifeline co-publisher Kat Clamia reached out to me along with Phil Falco and then the editor Michelle Abunder and said, hey, we're doing this anthology comic. It's based off of the popular YouTube series, which I was familiar with. They said, we're kickstarting this. And one of the concepts in the comic books of the comic shop sitcom is called Rat City. And so I read the premise that Cheyenne Iwulu, who created the show, created the idea. And I said, okay, I can jam with this because I saw elements of Frank Miller's Daredevil, which is actually the ancestor of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I saw some kind of like Cowboy Bebop in there. So I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I think I can find the balance of the melodrama and the humor and make something that, again, has a theme and has a character that we care about, which is the main character of the story, a guy named Jeremy Bates, who gets turned into a rat human hybrid, which is, I mean, you know what I mean? That's wild. Only in comic books are you going to be able to pull that off. Possibly in a trauma film, but I think that would be the extent of it.
So, having worked on properties like Batman and stuff like that, what is the biggest thing that you've taken away from your experiences?
Really that, we call them characters because so many creators and editors have created this illusion of that. But at the core, Batman is an intellectual property. Intellectual properties have rules. You break them at your peril. And, as an editor of Batman, I had to be one of the caretakers of those rules. And that is something that I always try to tell people. It's like when you're writing these characters and you get super emotionally invested, keep in context. This is an intellectual property. It is owned by a corporation. It's not yours. Do the best you can. Do not let it emotionally kill you. And basically, through that, it helps me too as, someone who is providing those services for my company, impress that upon my clients. When you are developing your own ideas to become comic books and graphic novels, you are developing intellectual properties. And you should treat them with the same seriousness and comprehensiveness that DC Comics treats Batman.
So, having worked on a lot of properties from the the big publishers, are there any that you would still like to get your hands on as a writer, or do you you don't have to go into detail but do you have like a story that involving a character that you want to tell or you feel that needs to be told?
It's funny because I think a lot of people will say, I have the one Batman idea I want to do. I have the one Spider-Man idea I want to do. I don't have those for the big characters. And I think it's because I've been behind the veil and I understand the complications that come with those high-profile characters. So I would like to do what Frank Miller did with Daredevil and what Walt Simonson did with Thor, which is basically characters that have one foot in the grave or that the companies don't care about, to be able to create a really compelling character journey, thematic, dramatic story, and breathe new life into characters like that. That's where my interest is as a writer.
And, can you nail that down to one character or a certain group of characters?
I cannot do that.
Okay.
If you see the announcement, then I've succeeded.
Okay.
And you remember this interview. That's who he was talking about.
Well, then you'll just have to come back and
100%. Then that's the sequel to this.
So your time at Batman was kind of I enjoyed it because that was when I was really into Batman. What do you hope that people remember from your time as the editor of that titles?
Well, I mean, listen, I was part of a group of amazing editors on Batman. At the time, they called it Camelot. So I was there for kind of like the last wave of Camelot. And what we have now is 25, 26 years later, those stories are still beloved. No Man's Land is a Batman event that, as far as I'm concerned, has not been surpassed. I say that objectively. No Man's Land was highest scale, longest term, really ambitious. We invited a lot of new creators in Batman mythos. What we did in revamping the entire Batman line, the Greg Rucka, Sean Marlborough Detective Comics, beloved, the Devin Grayson, Dale Eaglesham Batman psychological thriller titled Batman Gotham Knights,
Yeah.
right? From the Larry Hama, Scott McDaniel Batman, you got the Ed Brubaker Scott McDaniel Batman. And then I got to work with Butch Geist on Birds of Prey, which continues to be one of my career highlights. I miss Butch terribly. He died earlier this year, but to get to work on Oracle and Black Canary, which are two characters that I really came to love, and to be able to shepherd them through an important time in that mythology and their relationship, I mean, that's as good as it gets.
Is there like an instance that somebody when you were editing Batman that one of the writers came to say, I want to do this, and you said, as you said, you can't really, because they're a licensed property, you have to kind of stay within the sandbox. If they wanted to do it, that you had to say no to.
Well, there's always the creative urge to push things past certain boundaries and barriers. And one of the things that I always try to communicate with creators is these things that you see as limitations, see them as dramatic opportunities, right? So the fact that Batman cannot kill, that's not a limitation. That's a dramatic opportunity, right? So that was how I tried to kind of like pivot their perspective of things. But of course, there were certainly times when I had to, really tell creators, okay, you cannot do that with Batman. Batman has very specific rules. There were times when I had to protect how Batman was portrayed in the Justice League comic at the time. There were 2 times when I had to go to my bosses and we had to protect how Batman was portrayed in the Grant Morrison run of Justice League. And I mean, Grant Morrison is one of the most important writers of the last quarter century of mainstream superhero comics. But because of that, I mean, it was very boundary pushing. So sometimes we just had to really figure out other ways to maintain the integrity of Batman within that.
And if I'm remembering the story correctly, after Sarah Eason's murdered by the Joker,
yes,
Batman wanted to reveal his identity to Gordon. Am I remembering that correctly? Or
well, what happened was Batman attempted to reveal his identity to Gordon. Gordon wouldn't look. But what did happen actually after the murder of Sarah Essen Gordon is that Joker was shot in the leg by James Gordon. And his leg was supposed to be damaged forever. We wanted to have Joker using a cane forever. And inside of 3 months, DC was like, nope. Inside of 3 months, I think Joker...
And he got better.
Joker appeared in some storyline in Superman called Emperor Joker.
Right, yeah.
Legs were fine. So we were like, okay, again, the Joker's an intellectual property. One of the rules is he has to have 2 working legs.
And so what are you currently working on that you can talk about?
Right now, I am wrapping up a Todd McFarlane production Spawn Universe series called Bloodletter with my co-writer Tim Seeley. I am working on 2 graphic novels for HarperCollins. I'm working on a Harlem Renaissance graphic novel for actually Macmillan's adult imprint, which is called 23rd Street Books.
Yep, I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, so very excited about those things. And there's going to be a DC announcement in a few weeks. Working with a team of writers on something very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And final question, because I know you're a busy person.
All right.
But what do you know now about the comic industry or being a writer, editor, that you didn't know when you began that you wish you would have known back then?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not of the mindset of I wish I knew now what I knew then. I feel like it's a journey. I feel like my career has been a journey. If I had certain advanced knowledge, I wouldn't have believed it anyway. I think we all know that comics is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And to run the marathon, your muscles have to get torn. Your bones have to get weary. Your lactic acid has to get generated. And if you make it to the end, then you have persevered, right? And so this is the way it was supposed to be. The lessons that I learned at the time I was supposed to learn.
And so, where can people find? Are you on social media, or are you? Where can people find your
Oh,
work?
I am on all the socials.
Okay.
There is no way in this modern world to escape, unless you're Ed Brubaker and you just don't go on any of the socials. But I am Joe Illidge on Facebook. I am Joseph P. Illidge on Twitter, Blue Sky. I am Illmaster1 on Instagram, Joseph Philip Illidge on LinkedIn, Joseph Illidge on TikTok. And I think that's all of them.
Well, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your con day to chat with us, and we would love to have you on our regular show for a more long format discussion if you're up for it, and we'll talk afterward.
I'm up for that. You can ask me more dangerous questions.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time, and it's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you.